Hello everybody and welcome back to Pokemon of the Week with me, Daniel, OnionGrave64 or Civil Onion based upon how you know me. This week's going to be a little bit more different to normal because it's more about the guide of the Pokemon this week, and our Pokemon, speaking of which, is Tyranitar number 248 in the Pokedex, and it is in the OU tier. When you look at its base stats, it's not really much of a wonder, is it, that this Pokemon's in the overused tier, because 4 of the 6 stats are green, and one of the other 2 is a very high orangey colour on our scale. So, needless to say, it has a very high base stat total of 600. Its highest stat is 134 in attack. That is monstrous. It's also got a very well distributed stats when it comes to defense, because its base 100 HP is high by default, its 110 in defense is huge, and the 100 in special defense may not look quite as huge as its physical defense. However, when Sandstream, one of its abilities, is in effect, that gets a 50% bonus, so that becomes arguably its biggest stat of all. Its base special attack of 95, in comparison to all these, does not look very impressive, but all the same it does prove to be rather useful indeed. The only thing that really sucks about Tyranitar is its speed base 61. Really not going to set the world on fire with that, although you don't need me to tell you that. 61 really is not very good. I will be showing you how Tyranitar generally gets around that in due course. Now, its other ability, I've already mentioned Sandstream, where Sandstorm comes onto the battlefield as soon as Tyranitar does. Unnerve means the opponent can't use berries when it's against Tyranitar. You will pretty much never see this unless you see a Tyranitar on a non-weather based team, and that's pretty rare. It's a Dark and Rock type, which is a very unusual type combination, and as a consequence we've got an unusual array of resistances and weaknesses going here. Tyranitar resists Dark, Fire, Flying, Ghost, Normal and Poison, but on the flip side it's weak to Bug, Fighting, Grass, Ground, Steel and Water. Both columns there are rather big. Its weakness to Fighting is a quadruple, by the way. So be very careful of Mach Punches and Vacuum Waves. It is also immune to Psychic, being part Dark. So let's get to the first of the 2 sets I'm going to talk about today, and I'll show you why we're not doing a third one in a moment or 2 down the line, maybe 10 minutes or so actually. We don't tend to whiz through sets too quickly on this programme. Anyway, the first set is by far and away the most common nowadays because of the increasingly aggressive metagame, and it's by just slapping a choice item on it. And the set itself, move-wise, is identical regardless of whether you want a choice scarf or a choice band. However, what I want to point out right now is that the choice band user uses an adamant nature. You would normally think it'd be the other way around, but when you're using a choice band on a Tyranitar, it is so blooming slow that having the adamant nature is the superior choice. Now let's look at the moves. Stone Edge is obvious. It's the highest stab move that you've got in terms of brutal root raw power. Unfortunately it's not very accurate, so you do have Crunch as your other stab move to go in there. That's only the base 80 attack compared to 100 on Stone Edge, but it's 100% accurate, and it does happen to lower defense, which can be quite helpful. Pursuit is there for Pokemon that you've switched into that might have used Psychic, and you've obviously been immune to that. They've wanted to switch away, and you've pursued them on the way out and killed them. Espeon and Xatu, Latios, they're Pokemon that generally you will try and do that to. Your final move is the move that pretty much all choice item users use if they have it in the form of superpower, because obviously you hit with a base 120 fighting type move. Sure, your attack and your defense go down 1 stage, but as a choice user you tend to switch out after you've hit something, and as a result the stat drop doesn't really matter too much. Obviously Tyranitar's not going to be pursuited on its way out, so the drop in defense is kind of irrelevant to it. However, if you don't like that, you can go for Low Kick, and the reason why Low Kick is viable in OU, albeit not as viable as Superpower, is because most of the Pokemon that you're hitting super effectively with a fighting type move are indeed very heavy. So Pokemon like Ferrothorn, quite a heavy Pokemon. You see the odd Snorlax in OU, obviously that's a very heavy Pokemon. So that gives you a bit more versatility. You do have to be careful though, because quite a lot of Pokemon in the OU tier are not heavy at all. They're rather light. Hence, the final move you try not to use unless you know you can bag the right prediction. So you may be looking at the EVs a bit bewildered. If you go for the choice band, and as a result an adamant nature is the right nature here, you might want to put 76 EVs in speed, and I had to check the number precisely with the Smogon website to make sure I wasn't talking rubbish. The reason the number is 76 is because it allows you to outspeed base 70 Pokemon that have not had a speed stat invested in. The two that I generally would say are in this bracket are Politoed and Cloyster. Quite a lot of Cloyster maximise both their attacks and then use Shell Smash. Sometimes they don't bother improving their speed at all, so you might be able to catch one of them. Bulky Politoed sets don't tend to improve their speed either, so you might be able to catch that out on the hop, if you excuse the horrible pun there. If you're going for a Choice Scarf, use a Jolly nature because you want to be as quick as you can, and even with a Choice Scarf, Tyranitar's not exactly Usain Bolt in disguise. And as a consequence, you need to go for your maximum speed and, you know, maximum attack, as we're both, and only put the 4 in HP. When you're going for your choice band, the 76 wants to come from your health stat, obviously, rather than your attack stat. Your attack being as high as possible is definitely the biggest factor here. Quick thing to consider, don't use both of these in the same way. A choice scarf user is a revenge killer, generally speaking, and a choice band user is a wall breaker. If you try and switch the roles round, you're not going to utilise your Pokemon properly, so try and resist. I see so much of it on simulators because people don't understand. Please don't be one of those people. So the second set, and the reason I wanted to talk about this set, is because if you'd asked me 3-4 years ago perhaps, what's the most common set on a Tyranitar, and I would point at this set and go, you'll see nothing but this, pretty much, and the odd sub-punching set. The lead Tyranitar in the past was incredibly popular, and the reason I brought it up now is because people that have come from Pokemon Battle Revolution onto simulators online were used to the concept of Team Preview. Team Preview, if you don't know what that is obviously now on the portable consoles, before battle starts you can see the Pokemon on the other person's team. That didn't used to be the case on handhelds, but it was always the case on non-portable consoles. And as a result, people that played non-portable consoles more aren't fazed by this. However, most people that play competitively are people that used DS's and Game Boy Advances when they were older, and SPs, yada yada yada. And as a consequence, they don't have the balls to use this set anymore. How it works is that you use Stealth Rock. Obviously, that's a pretty obvious thing to use. An entry hazard is always nice, and on a Pokemon as bulky as Tyranitar, it's very, very useful indeed. But you don't go for your physical moves, despite having a base 134 attack. Instead, you use the special attack. The key reason for this is that you get incredible type coverage. Another reason is that with maximum special attack investment, your special attack is another stat over 300 at level 100. Tyranitar being one of the few Pokemon that can get both its attack stats over 300 at the same time. I will no doubt mention that further on in the video too. Final move though, you might want to use Crunch, and you may think, why on earth would you want to do that when you've told me about all these special moves? Reason being is because most Psychic types are specially bulky, and as a result, even your uninvested Crunch will do more than the Dark Pulse. So that's why that's there. The reason to use the set over Hippowdon is a very important question as well that often gets asked. Hippowdon is arguably a bit bulky on the physical side, and it has access to a healing move. So you may ask, why would I use this? Reason is because A, Tyranitar has a much better move pool, and B, Tyranitar has a much better special defense. Obviously the nature of Sandstream means that your special defense gets that massive 50% bonus, and almost all sets want to utilise that as much as they can. The investment is maximising your speed, weirdly you may think. That is simply to try and outspeed as many Pokemon as possible that are trying to do a similar job to Tyranitar. Often it's other Tyranitar that try and do this. You want to try and outspeed them. So let's go on to why I've not done a third set with the do's and don'ts of Tyranitar. The reason I've not done a third set is because there are so many mistakes that people make with Tyranitar over and over and over again that I couldn't really explain it in one set. So instead I've done this list of do and don'ts. Firstly, make use of Tyranitar's move pool, because if you don't, you might as well just use Hippowdon. Like I said, it has a healing move, it also has Sandstream, And being pure ground type means it has a lot less weaknesses. It doesn't have the big issue with fighting types, which dominate the overused tier. And despite it having a weakness to ice, that kind of is counterbalanced just for the fact that pure ground is much more useful than rock dark defensively. Obviously, however, on the flip side, you've got to make use of Tyranitar's special defense as well, because that's the nature of Sandstream for you. Make most of Tyranitar's special defense. Another reason for this is because a lot of the Pokemon that will attack you with super effective moves especially will not one-hit KO you. Starmie Surfs, if they're not choiced, will not KO you. That's a nigh-on guarantee from full health, so you do have a bit of extra bulk. And also, when in doubt, feel free to spam the choice items. When in doubt, and you don't want to think too much about the Tyranitar that you're picking for your team, when in doubt, put a choice scarf on it. Because that is literally the idiot-proof way of playing with Tyranitar. You can't do too much wrong. It's not a Pokemon that requires an incredible amount of prediction, because frankly it hits everything hard even when it's not very effective. But let's move on to the don'ts. Don't use rock polish. It may seem a really good idea, but from all the experience I have had of the metagame, all that happens is that you use rock polish, something switches in like Scizor or Machamps or things like that, and then you have to switch out immediately or face being Mac punched or bullet punched to death in one hit. They hit on the physical side, which you are weaker on despite having a higher base stat, and it's going to completely wreck shit on a massive dinosaur for you, so don't do it. Dragon Dance and Home Claw sets may look like a cool gimmick, and Dragon Dance set was quite common in times gone by, but as the metagame's got more and more attacking, they've just become obsolete and really don't use them at all. There's still an argument for the sub-punch set, but the increased amount of phasing due to the new phasing move Dragon Tail means that that's not quite as viable as it was either in the past. And the second don't is don't forget that Tyranitar is dark and rock. Its pre-evolution, Larvitar and Pupitar are rock ground, and it's a schoolboy error to assume that it's the same type. It is not. Luckily, Tyranitar is not quadruple weak to grass or water. It is still weak to both of these things, but only 2 times rather than the 4. And you don't have an immunity to electric, which is something that very new people constantly fall for. It's immune to psychic, not electric. I hope you found this useful. Talk to you all next week. Please leave comments and feedback and all that sort of thing. Really want to hear from you. Talk to you next week.